Good morning, good morning, good morning. You ever notice how burnout doesn't always look like a breakdown? Sometimes it looks like showing up, hitting your goals, paying your bills, answering emails, going to the gym, doing everything that you normally do well, while simultaneously feeling kind of mentally standing at the exit door. Have you ever felt like there's some sort of functionality without spirit? That people around you maybe aren't collapsing, but they're quietly disconnecting. They're emotionally flat. There's something a little bit off lately. Maybe they feel a little bit tired. Maybe there's some autopilot feelings. Maybe there's some numbness that you're noticing in yourself or in others. Maybe you're having feelings like, hey, this life is objectively good, so why does something feel wrong? My friend is doing very well. Why do they feel a little bit off? It's kind of like drinking sand from a tap. Infinite content, zero nourishment. Overstimulated, but also psychologically undernourished. I don't think burnout is just working too much anymore. I think that framing feels a little incomplete, a little shallow, a little individual, and definitely too easy to apply in today's lens. Because culturally, burnout is everywhere right now. People are tired all the time. Entire Reddit threads full of people saying, the job is good, the goals are realistic, I work from home, I make decent money, my boss is fine, and yet something inside of them is quietly shutting down. That's the weird part. Not really collapse, no dramatic breakdowns or big moments, but just this like strange, persistent exhaustion, detachment, emotional flattening, inability to care or rest properly, inability to really feel restored come Monday morning. People functioning externally while internally disconnected is a big theme these days. And honestly, I think a lot of us know what that feels like right now, which is why I wanted to make this episode. Burnout used to feel like collapse. Now it feels like functionality without spirit. A lot of modern workers are physically sitting at their desks while mentally standing at an exit door, like I said before. And the scary part is how normal this feeling is kind of becoming throughout all of our society, individually, in my circles, online. We're seeing a lot of this pop up. So today's episode is going to be about burnout. We're not going to be talking about anti-work or anti-capitalism or anti-technology, but we want to ask a couple questions here, like what is and what if burnout is trying to tell us something? What is the biggest signal between ourself and our unconscious self? Maybe burnout is what happens when human beings are exposed to a permanently unsustainable level of psychological resonance. That's the phrase that kind of keeps sticking with me, is high resonance. Modern life is really loud, not literally loud, but psychologically loud, emotionally, cognitively. Everything is urgent, optimized, personal, stimulating, algorithmically amplified, emotionally charged, fighting for attention constantly, and work framed in kind of military terms. For example, I learned recently that an all hands meeting, your kind of classic tech meeting for everybody in the company, all hands used to mean all hands on deck, which was necessary for survival out at sea. So just learning stuff like that kind of made me giggle a bit. So definitely work being framed in these like all or nothing terms. All of this stuff leads to one path, and then that might be burnout. So for the episode today, I'd like to just start by defining what we think it is and then kind of going from there. So when we look at burnout, most people, like I said, think it's working too much, being stressed out, being tired. But I've been tired before. I've definitely been stressed. Those aren't necessarily burnout symptoms. Burnout feels a little different. Burnout feels like emotional flatness, detachment, cynicism or sarcasm if you're me, lack of motivation, inability to care, relief instead of fulfillment as a goal, and functionality without spirit. It's a big difference if you look at two ways of thinking about things. You could say, of course, I need a break. And then you could say, something about this no longer fits with me. And that's a big difference. But also, it's a feeling we have too. And it's a feeling more so than anything, at least for me. For me, it feels like the normal things, like say being a good productive worker, partner, or friend, seem so difficult and even annoying. And also, that the things I love to do, say reading, listening to podcasts, watching YouTube, gaming, seem kind of dull in a way that doesn't really pull me toward them. So on one hand, you have the things that you're good at or you're responsible for or to do, and those really aren't feeling great, and they're feeling a little bit annoying. They're feeling a little bit more like tasks to complete as opposed to real true purposes and callings. And then on the other side, the things you do to kind of escape from that or to enjoy your life a little bit more, they don't call to you as much. That for me is kind of what burnout feels like. It used to look like collapse, but like I said, now it looks like functionality without spirit. A lot of modern workers are physically sitting at their desks, again, while mentally standing at that exit door. So that's the scary part is again, how normal this feeling has become and how commonplace it is. And for me, like I said, it's not new for me. There's lots of times in my life where burnout appeared, and it's also not as linear as people think. It can actually happen after big achievements or promotions, after major projects or goals are hit, after big wins, and of course, randomly. I can tell you many times where what on paper felt like a huge success for me maybe led to a dull couple days after the achievement and led to these feelings of burnout kind of bubbling up. Now, what I would say is there are definitely levels to this. You can have burnout symptoms surfacing and then you can be going through it wholeheartedly, and you can see it on your face, kind of like a depressive phase. So there are definitely aspects of it that are different. And for me, there are different times that it gets prompted up and that it does come about, right? So when we look at it, you're thinking and you're expecting to be fulfilled. You're expecting accomplishments and satisfaction from what you do, but you really feel relief instead. That's a big indicator for me that, maybe what you're doing isn't aligned with what you truly should be doing. And we're going to get to that later on self-actualization and, your conscious and unconscious self. But when you have a feeling of accomplishment that is met with relief, i.e., I need to close this big deal or I'm not going to hit my quota, and then you do, and everyone around you is like, hey, you should be popping champagne, you just closed a big deal, you just hit that big milestone, how happy are you? And oftentimes I've been met with these situations like, it feels relieving knowing that that's something I needed to do. So, when you look at burnout, it can often come from places like this too. And in a high performer, that's normally how it shows up. And, I can be a high performer on my best day and definitely medium to average on my worst days. But for me, that's how it shows up. And I've read quite a bit about burnout in the lead up to this episode. And that's what I gather happens to a lot of high functioning professionals as well. They no longer feel joy in the accomplishments that they're achieving and the new goals. And these might be lofty to them as well. And it just kind of feels flat. Just kind of feels like, okay, well, if I do hit that big target, then what happens? What's next for me? And that feeling can really lead people to sit still with their feelings. And that's where burnout can, like I said, pop up. And the feelings of like, hey, that $1 million deal I closed that I skipped meals for, and I went to the gym, only one time throughout I was doing that deal, and I ignored my friends and some of my other responsibilities to get that done, and then I close and I don't feel the achievement as strongly as I thought I would. So, burnout also does kind of transcend professions, right? Like I know a lot of different people in different professions, and I have a lot of coworkers and friends, and obviously I've been in sales for a long time, but burnout does transcend professions. I'm not just going to make this about high performing salespeople. I think if you're watching this episode, you definitely know what I'm talking about, and hopefully some of this stuff kind of rings true for you too as well. And I say that burnout is everywhere. There is a cultural aspect to this too. It's not just you. It's not just how you're relating to your profession, although so many people have reached the same conclusion, which leads me to kind of think about the cultural implications and causes of this new and old phenomenon of burnout, right? And for me, and when I think about this, human beings are not really built to remain in a state of constant urgency, constant novelty, constant stimulation, constant emotional intensity. It's just not sustainable. Everything eventually breaks, right? Or maybe more accurately, something will dull itself to survive, one of the two. So you can have a high resonance, and eventually that's just going to dull the receptors on our side to be able to receive that resonance. On the other side, we also just might not see that velocity of stuff coming our way. I think of like a hurricane, right? When a hurricane's coming at you, the weather's really intense, and the intensity of the weather normally is an indicator of how long it's going to last. And in a hurricane, it's probably the most extreme example. But for me, when something is resonating really high, when tensions are really high, emotions are really high, that's not really a place you can live in. And so, when things get a little hot and heavy in your life, you got to think about it like that too. The resonance might not stick around. And if it does, I'm going to kind of dull myself out to it. And that's where we see kind of burnout arising in a lot of folks. It doesn't often look dramatic anymore. It kind of looks like, for me and for others, a lot of doom scrolling, a lot of dissociation, kind of emotional flatness, passive consumption, definitely cynicism and sarcasm, as I've said before, an inability to feel motivated and an inability to feel fully alive. That's definitely something I've experienced before and recently. And what's terrifying is, many of these people are not failing. They're actually surviving, but on the surface, it might look like they're succeeding, right? And that creates a bit of a contradiction when you think about it. Life and this life is objectively good. So then why does something feel wrong? Why are there so many people that have experienced these symptoms? And again, I did my research before I talk about this topic. I saw a lot of people talking about burnout in their own way, and this was trending at different points of the year as well. But I think a lot of people are trying to solve this as existential burnout, and I think that's why there's so much self-care content out there right now. And a lot of it does feel hollow. A lot of it does feel like here's one hack that's going to change your life. But, if you're not addressing the core symptoms of burnout, which we'll get into later, you're not really able to use those hacks wisely or feel that they're even being helpful, right? So a lot of people are trying to solve this burnout with like optimization tools, productivity systems, supplements, routines, hacks, timers, pomodoros, dopamine effects, and detoxes, morning protocols. I've tried them all. Those things can help fatigue for sure, but they can't solve the feeling of, I'm no longer connected to the life I'm maintaining. And I think that's the core of burnout, is when there's a big gap between who you'd like to be and who you see yourself as, and then what you're doing every day. It's definitely more prevalent in folks who have a wider gap. And that's where I think we can really do some work. In addition, in Canada, we've also been seeing a recession pop up, and with the inflation coming from the post-pandemic era and the way the economy has shifted overall, I think everyone is feeling squeezed financially. And so that also leads to, a little bit of a sense of, okay, that job and that salary that sustained me before is no longer meeting the same standard of purchasing power and is no longer covering some of that extra stuff that made this all worth it. So, one of my core observations is a lot of people are saying, the job that I have is good, the money's okay, my boss is okay, the working conditions, like say working from home, are great. And yet the motivation is gone, the joy is gone, the energy is gone. That really feels like burnout is everywhere. And this isn't just work, by the way. This can show up in your dating life, in friendships, in your enjoyment with like the regular stuff, for me, sports, but also like not being able to enjoy movies or TV or social media the same way has also led to this. And I think there's another thing happening, which I like to call kind of tech bastardization. It's really turning something once pure into an optimized, algorithmically inclined, capitalistic affair. And so like, for example, where sports for a lot of us was an escape, it's now, gambling is everywhere. You can't go on a sport, any sort of, I like to watch soccer. Every soccer team in the English Premier League is sponsored by gambling companies, right? So if you're just trying to interact with something pure, let me go watch some sports, you're being hit with gambling ads the entire time. And it's like, hey, go gamble. And, are you really thinking about the sport if you're not putting your money where your mouth is? And so this optimization is really becoming popular. I've noticed the same thing in movies. The need to become content or to go viral is now supplanting the need to make a good movie. In the larger corporate world, a lot of friendships are becoming networking and vice versa. Networking is becoming friendships and the lines are being blurred. Hobbies are increasingly being encouraged to become side hustles. Oh, you like that thing? Go make a YouTube channel about it, and now you can do it 24/7. Be careful what you wish for type of thing there. I think that a lot of people do well with that, but not everything needs to be a side hustle. And another thing too, like creators thinking they need to become brands. If you're known for one thing, now you're thinking about the holistic picture of it and you're becoming brands. And this whole thing, what I'm getting at is like the compartmentalization or the economization of formerly pure things, or formerly things that seemed pure anyway. My favorite sports are inundated with money problems now, and that feels like we're getting a little bit away from the kind of cultural essence of that sport. I know a lot of athletes today, to go on this tangent, they're also building businesses, social media accounts, they're doing 10 different things. And I think that leads to a little bit more of a fragmented athlete where, maybe in that pure era of sport, we're really only seeing people who did one thing, and that's that sport every single day, all night. Of course, happy for those folks who are having great careers and prospering, feeding their families and making money. But this economization of every aspect of social media has led to this kind of, like I said, economization of everything. And that leads to burnout. It makes us unable to just sit and truly enjoy things. It makes us feel like we need to consume or produce or capture everything that we're doing, right? And that can lag behind us. So, for me, and then a lot of the thesis of this episode is burnout is not individual. It's actually cultural feedback. And I think that, maybe it's about how we have shown up, done the hard part at work, in our personal lives, wherever you want to see it, but feel as though something is off. So like on one hand, you have a growing set of information about the world in your pocket, in your phone, on YouTube, on Instagram, on Facebook. All those places are full of information about the world, full of beautiful things, full of dangerous and scary things all the same. And it's a really interesting time. It's unlike any other time that we've been alive, actually. And on the other hand, you have this economy with its new enhancements that match this. Its AI algorithms and its constant need for more have really captured even more of the hearts of the minds of the regular worker. We're not just able to go to work and come home at the end of the day anymore. We are constantly notified by emails, push, Slack notifications, all sorts of after work asks. And then there's the constant just onlineness all the time. So, if you turn on your phone in the morning, there's a chance that you wake up and you go on Instagram and you see a bomb going off in another city or someone climbing to the top of Mount Everest. Now, is that any way to start your day? Like really, you're just trying to hit your goals, to trying to focus on what's in front of you. And this social media of ours, this little glass tablet in our hands, is taking us to sometimes, a lifetime achievement you're watching someone do before you've even had your breakfast. On the other side, you can be hit with all sorts of images of violence and terror in the world, and that can start your day a whole different way. So when we're looking at burnout, there's a lot of cultural aspects, there's a lot of individual aspects, and I think we've covered some of the reasons that folks are feeling this today. Now let's get into what you can do about it, because I'm not just here to talk about burnout and say, oh yeah, it's common and go on your way. I'd like to see if I can help a little bit. And some of the things that I've really done to help when I've gone through phases of burnout are stuff I'd like to share with you all to see if it would be helpful for you as well. The first place I go when I think about burnout, and when I've identified that I'm going through burnout, or when I have identified that someone's asking me for help is going through burnout, is to look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Definitely recommend you looking it up, just taking a quick glance of it. Happy to post it in the comments as well. But there are basically different levels of a pyramid. And so you have, I think it's 4 levels. And what they have is, your basic needs, your safety needs, your love and belonging needs, and then your esteem. So when you look at your physiological needs, like the first place I go to when I think about people going through burnout is your basic survival. So think of things like, are you eating food and like enough food, 3 meals a day, healthy food? Are you getting enough water? Are you sleeping? Do you have a shelter over your head and a consistent place to lay your head at night? And are you healthy? Some questions to ask, like I said, are you sleeping? Are you exhausted? Are you physically taking care of yourself? If this layer is not met, it would be impossible to escape any sort of symptom of burnout. These things are essential to what we do. And so the first place you can look is at all of these indicators. And if you're not meeting any of these or one of them, that would be the first place I go. So the next level, and this is one rung up in the ladder or up the pyramid, is safety and kind of stability. It's job security, income, savings, predictable environment, feeling safe about the future. Do you feel secure? Are you constantly worrying about money? Do layoffs, AI, inflation, and housing costs, or the economy occupy your thoughts? This is where a lot of burnout lives. So that's number two. And, those things are harder to get a grasp on. I think we're all kind of battling to get security there. But the general feelings is if you feel okay about these things. Not that they're perfect, not that there aren't flaws with them, but do I feel okay about my job? Yes, sure, great. Okay, let's move on. Is my income, could it be better? Sure, but is it enough to meet my needs? Great. Okay, then we can move on. So the third level is love and belonging. And I think this one is a great place to go to get nourishment, but can also be a big drag on you if you haven't met the first two levels, right? If your job is insecure, it's tough to hang out with friends. And so the third level, love and belonging, it's all about connection, feeling part of a community, and being able to connect with others, right? So we look at, friendships, family, if everything's going well there, how your partner in your life is going. Do you have a romantic love interest? Are you guys building a future together? Do you have a sense of community? And are you a member of a different organization or group of people that's working towards stuff? And do you feel understood? Some questions to ask. Do you have people you can call on a hard day? Do you feel connected with those? And are you feeling lonely despite being surrounded by people? That's another, indicator. I think most people, though, answer yes in some way to are you lonely despite being surrounded by people due to social media, just feeling a little bit introspective, but that might just be me. Infinite communication and little connection would define the needs not being met in this part of the equation. So, if you're not feeling connected to those around you, that could be another source of, needs not being met, right? The fourth is esteem. And I think this is where you see a lot of people who level up or to get to another stage in their life are all feeling these kinds of feelings. And this would be a sense of achievement. So you have confidence in you and your abilities. You have a lot of accomplishments and a sense of them. You have a deep respect for yourself and those around you. You have status. You have recognition as well. So, some questions to ask yourself for this are, what are you trying to prove? Who you're trying to impress? What does achievement matter to you and why? There's actually a fifth level, and that's where I maybe made a boo-boo here, but this is the final kind of actualization stage, and this is where you can really become yourself, and your higher self will speak to you directly. This is your sense of meaning, your sense of purpose, sense of creativity, authenticity, and individuation. So you're able to answer questions like, what do you actually want? What feels meaningful to you? What kind of life fits you? And are you living and moving closer to that reality? This is where a lot of authors that I've read recently have made a big impact on me. Obviously, Carl Jung being the first one. He talks about individuation quite a bit. And then there's another, actually, it's right next to me, Paul Millard. It's Pathless Path. And that's another book about finding what works for you, looking at work in a new way, looking at your relationship to the world around you in a new way. And this is kind of arising from a sense of burnout. So when I look at it, and I look at Maslow's hierarchy, and I look at Jung, and I look at the Pathless Path, I think many people today are trying to jump to Maslow's level 5. They're trying to find purpose and meaning and self-actualization, while other levels just feel shaky. It's like trying to find purpose while worrying about rent, or trying to become yourself while exhausted. You can't really create when you're feeling unsafe, and you can't really try and build meaning or effectively build meaning while carrying 100 invisible cognitive tasks. So take care of yourself, and then your house and home, and then your community is the old adage. So, that's why I would really focus on that hierarchy of needs and come back to each stage in the pyramid of where I'm at. Of course, it takes a lot to move to another stage. And what I would say is it takes a lot of patience, a lot of self-love, and a lot of time if you're looking to get there. If you're looking for any practical takeaways, and if you're feeling burnt out, you don't want to start with purpose, destiny, or passion. I've definitely made that mistake many times, is feeling like something is going to arise in my life that's meaningful and godly, and I'm going to go and attack it with my full purpose and my full passion. It's going to be my destiny. That really happens. So, if you're experiencing burnout today, start with the simplest of things. Shrink your goals. Get some sleep. Make sure you have 2 weeks of clean health where you're eating nice and you're sleeping great and you're feeling good and you're reinforcing that. Have some stability, have some confidence in your relationships, and have some confidence in yourself too. That's tough to build, but there are some ways to do it. But from there, if you have met, your sleep, your health, your stability, your relationships, and your confidence, you can start to build meaning. You can build upward brick by brick. And one thing that struck me recently is, a lot of people are trying to self-actualize while standing on their unstable foundations. So if you're trying to create or become or individuate or express yourself or build meaning while simultaneously feeling economically uncertain, psychologically fragmented, overstimulated, socially disconnected, or existentially anxious, it might be difficult. It might be like standing on emotional quicksand. So maybe that's a part of why so many people feel exhausted all the time, is because the lower levels never fully stabilize anymore. Safety itself feels unstable. So part of this, like I said, isn't just us. It's civilization rising above operating temperature. Modern life is loud, it's urgent, it's stimulating, it's personalized, it's algorithmic, right? We also have a ton of individual, invisible cognitive tabs. If you think about your average browser, mine looks insane, by the way. I usually have about 30 tabs open, and that's just per window. I think I have many windows going as well. But if you look at, your average person, when they wake up in the morning, they're dealing with like text, Slack, AI, emails, bills, future, inflation, AI, again, career, family, health, and, generally the situation globally with some of the wars going on. Open loops are everywhere. The nervous system never fully closes. And that's one of the things that I think we really need to look at, is like, when do I shut off? The high resonance cannot last, as I said before. Eventually, you see collapse or numbness or cynicism or emotional flattening, one of the four. Kind of like drinking sand from a tap. You can't do this. It's not sustainable. Modern life definitely does feel that way. So when we look at capitalism and just take that angle for a second, a book that recently really, really impacted me and really felt like it was worth it was The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. I'll link the author below. Its main points are talking about how our attention is being extracted, our behaviors are being predicted, and our engagement is being optimized. The new work is one that follows you home. I've said it before, but a lot of the examples of modern media, our Slack, our Teams, LinkedIn, personal branding, side hustles, content creation is all being looped together in new modern expectations of work. People don't just work, they actually start to become their metrics, their performance, their output, and this self becomes a project. There's also a sense of inevitabilism. Human history is people rejecting inevitability. When I think about this, I look behind me to the poster that has recently been added to my wall, but also something that has been really true for me and emblematic of where I think we are as a society. And it's a loop. It's the Ouroboros. And when we think about this, like, what is it? What is the snake eating its own tail? It's an ancient symbol. It's about a self-consuming cycle, a self-sustaining loop, and kind of the beginning and end of something being a little bit indistinguishable, right? So why it hit me is it's being a big symbol of my life right now. It may literally, symbolize my entire year. And I also found some big parallels in the modern world, right? So when we look at like modern examples of it, and modern examples of like a cyclical nature, and in relating it back to burnout, work goes to exhaustion, leads to consumption, leads to a temporary relief, and then back to work. Achievement, we have a goal, we achieve it, the dopamine floods, then we feel empty, then we have a next goal. Productivity, optimizing something, performing it, optimizing it again, performing it, never asking why, for whom, or for what. Same thing goes for content. We're consuming content about improving life instead of living life. We're doom scrolling, then we get anxiety, then we do more doom scrolling. With social media, we have the comparative sense, we have the insecurity, we have posting, and then comparison again. So what if burnout is not the loop breaking, but your awareness of the loop increasing? There's a big distinction there. So like when you ask yourself this, what loops am I feeding? Which loops are feeding me and which loops serve me? Which are consuming me, right? When we're acting inside something, and something I talked about in my last episode about mental malware, you got to look at what you're engaging in and whether or not it's kind of running the show or you're running the show, right? If you turn on Instagram so that you can take an active engagement in your life, great. But if you're feeling anxious or burnt out and you turn on that thing, it's going to feed you a bunch of stuff that might not be helpful or serving you at all. So we got to look at stability versus vitality. And that's another place I go. This might be, the thing that provides stability is simultaneously draining vitality, right? So your career, a routine, an identity, habits, relationships, and status. The thing keeping you safe might actually be hauling you up. Many people inherit these kinds of loops or patterns, right? Your schooling, your job, a promotion, a mortgage, retirement, all of that stuff is kind of a big loop for people. It's the modern working world, it's the modern life. But a lot of people don't consciously choose this. It just kind of gets handed to them. When we look at Jung, and Carl Jung, the unconscious eventually rebels. And I think that's where burnout comes up. At first, you see discomfort, then you might see restlessness, then you might see anxiety, and then you see burnout, right? So the psyche just starts screaming at you. And this is kind of what I think burnout is. It's the gap between your unconscious and your conscious mind. So when we look at society, and we go back to the image behind me, the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail, society itself is definitely caught in one of these recurring loops. Growth for growth's sake, optimization for optimization's sake, engagement for engagement's sake, and productivity the same way. The system is feeding on itself. If you look back at that drinking sand from a tap, that's what society is doing right now. You keep consuming, society keeps consuming, but it never feels nourished. The loop sustains itself, but not the society, not the user, not the person. The hopeful turn is the moment you see this and you're no longer fully trapped inside of it. You can still participate, but now you can choose, and awareness becomes that first crack, the first place that your psyche kind of breaks. So what if burnout isn't the snake eating its own tail? What if burnout is the moment the snake finally realizes what it's doing? When you look at this from a personal level, why does this symbol resonate? What is the potential painting? Why does it feel personal? Again, right? Self-cannibalization is a huge part of burnout. Optimization becoming self-cannibalization, loops becoming visible, and awareness as a first crack are some of the themes that you can look at. But if you're not noticing how you are contributing to your own burnout, then that's the first place I would look, right? So we go back to Maslow's pyramid. We understand that a lot of this is draining us, and we understand the system's also draining us. So we need to go back to protecting ourselves, to working on the hierarchy needs, and then to be looking at our unconscious self and doing some deep digging to understand, what is my unconscious mind trying to say, right? So that's where I go back to the pathless path and Jung as well. Pathless path talks about us inheriting a lot of scripts, as I've talked about earlier. Choosing your career, a sense of status, and our ideas of our productivity and optimization and success are all coming from outside sources. They're not coming from internal. So we need to think about that. Question to ask yourself about anything that is making you feel burnt out. Did I choose this or did I inherit it? When we go to Jung, he talks about individuation. And if you don't know what that is, it's basically the process of joining your conscious and unconscious minds, as I understand it. What this means is you have to look at your dreams, you have to look at your childhood, you have to look at all the things that are pointing you as signals in your life towards something. And that takes a lot of self-reflection. In order to discover your persona and your authentic self, it takes a lot, right? And so, if you're feeling burnout, you're probably not moving towards your authentic self. And that's something to think about. Burnout is resistance. It's your own mind's resistance to whatever's going on in your life. And it's saying, this is enough, right? It's not weakness or laziness, it's signal. It's a feedback loop, and it's pressure coming from inside your mind. So, what if burnout is the unconscious mind refusing to continue carrying on a role that no longer fits, right? That's like a spiritual compression. That's what I would think it is. So again, what can you do? What can you do? If you know you're burnt out, things are tough, you've realized that this isn't really what you want to be doing, but you don't really have an alternative, right? So you want to avoid kind of your guru mode. You want to avoid life hacks. Return to the pyramid. Go to the ground floor. Sleep, move around, get some food. enjoy and invest in the relationships that are the most important to you and seek stability at all costs. If it means shrinking your goals, then do it that way. You don't need to have these lofty goals to get out of burnout. You need to have goals that are achievable and hittable that day. So shrink them as small as possible. Rebuild brick by brick, one step, one day, one task at a time. Do not put too much on your plate. You will never leave burnout this way. For me, it looked like, okay, I have to go to work today. What else do I have to do? Let's shrink that to the bare minimum that's achievable by me today. If you can stack a few of these days in a row, then you're building towards something which is like a new sense of self and identity. And that's where you're going to restart this process, okay? The second thing that I would really recommend is eliminating all sorts of harmful self-talk. It's not good for you. And it's definitely going to compound the sense of burnout. And the more you show up to a feeling and to an emotion, say the more you feed this idea, the sense of burnout and the sense of things not going well, the more you're going to be thinking about it and focusing on it. So try your best to notice all the ways you're talking about yourself or your situation negatively and kind of eliminate that. A couple exercises to try out. One of them is asking yourself, what if it all fails? What if the worst case scenario happens? Sit in it, imagine it, feel it, and then imagine that you survive that. Like what's, if I lose my job, what's the worst that's going to happen to me? Does it really feel as though my anxiety is making it feel, or is it something that is actually not as bad as I thought, right? Another way to think about this problem is to ask yourself the opposite question. What if it all works out? Sit in that too. Most people never do. But if you ask yourself, hey, what if everything works out the way I wanted it to? Wouldn't that be nice? And that's kind of, for me, a lot better than saying, everything's going to fail. You can also try adding something to look forward to as like another, slight tip. A fun night out, a concert or a movie, a vacation if you can afford it. Even a few months out, like in the distance, can really make a quick improvement. Just having something to look forward to, be it small, be it large, be it whatever you can do, would have me just as a light at the end of the tunnel. Burnout can really destroy time horizons, and it can really make things feel like everything's ending, the world's collapsing, nothing's ever going to be the same again. These are all mental tricks that the mind plays on us. So if you can just shine a light at a future date and work towards that, for me, that's always been very helpful. So when we look at, the counter symbol to the snake behind me, I really like to think about how life moves on regardless, kind of like a river. You can drift, you can fight it, or you can steer the boat in the right direction. So humans kind of innovate towards freedom. And when we're on this river of life, one of the things that I keep thinking about is nothing's ever over, right? So we think that we're in these unique times, that AI is new, and it is, and we've never lived in an era like AI. But we did go through the printing press, counterculture, labor rights, race rights. We went through the internet already. We've had open source and privacy tools in the mix for a long time. So, this isn't really new. It's just another stage of the same game, right? It's just another way that capitalism has increased itself and increased its perpetuality within itself, right? It's a self-perpetuating system. So it needs to find new areas to capture and conquer and to dominate. And one of those things that I've noticed is it's really starting to dominate the mental and spiritual side quite a bit. So, if you're on that river and you're wondering, this is some real choppy water, I don't think I'm going to survive, I don't know what's happening. Are you constantly steering, or are you constantly drifting in life? And that's something to think about. I know things are going to be tough. When we think about burnout, some of the things that we're dealing with are insurmountable. Some parts of life are very hard. But what can you do to avoid yourself from drifting? That's what I would think about. So maybe burnout isn't really a malfunction. It's a message from ourselves to ourselves. It's the psyche saying, hey, this arrangement is no longer sustainable. Not really as destruction, but more as like an invitation to re-examine your paths, an invitation to re-examine what gives you strength and energy, another invitation to re-examine your identity and the systems that you're a part of, and maybe begin working towards something that actually feels inhabitable again, actually feels more like you. So if you're going through burnout, what I've tried to do today is to just give you a few tips to think about it, a few directions forward, and definitely a framework to kick its butt if it's ever in your way. But what I would like to say is that it's different for everybody. And what works for me might not work for you. And throughout this process, if all you do is learn more about yourself, then you're doing it the right way. And so whatever you learn at the end of that tunnel might not sit well with your current life. And that's something that you need to pay attention to. If your burnout phase is heavy and you come out of it with some new conclusions about who you are and what you'd like to do, stay with that. Pay attention to it. It's very important. This stuff of ours, this brain of ours, is really powerful. And the unconscious mind tends to hide itself well, but also has a huge role in everything we do. So the more you can get closer to the unconscious mind being identical to the conscious mind, or as close as possible, the more you've achieved individuation, the more you can stave off the conditions and the harmful effects of burnout. This has been another edition of Thinking Out Loud with Jesse. I wanted to thank you again for listening to me today, and I would love to hear any comments on this, if I'm off base on anything that I've shared, or if any of these strategies would be helpful to you. Definitely want to know if I'm helping folks out there, and would love to know if there's any way we can improve as well collectively. Thanks again for watching, and we'll be back soon again with another edition. Take care.